Good morning. It's Friday, February 7th. We've had a busy week. We're going to spend some time today with talking about fertilizer and feed and pesticides. We have some guests on that are in that business well. We're going to start it off with Mr. Brad Laws from Laws Agriculture Service. Mr. Laws, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Good morning.
Morning to you.
Should we talk about our past?
Oh yeah. Well,
Yes.
I'm going to just see who can get the upper hand on that. Maybe we just think about that for a little bit.
Well, I've known your chairman, I think, for 36 years. I think he was the third employee that I hired when I bought this location. My brother and I bought this. And he was with us for about a year, but the call to go back to the kingdom was too great. So he went back up to the
It was
kingdom.
5, but I know it went fast.
I think it was about a year. But so anyway, I've known your chair for a long, long time in various situations. So thank you for inviting me, Russ.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to have you. And we're kind of a new committee, Brad, and but we're paying attention really, really well. And we're trying to get a feeling as far as for all the players in the business and really, what you're seeing out there. I mean, I don't know of anybody that's probably more in touch with what the ag business is doing right now. You've got several. I mean, you're ingrained with them, so we're kind of looking for how you see things going.
Yeah. Well, obviously number one, I think is the dairy farmers around here are concerned about the immigration. We've been hearing some rumors about what's going on. I think if I had to guess, and I don't know for sure, I'm sure that Steve could tell you, but my guess is it's probably 80% of the farms around here have Mexicans working for them. And so they've kind of gone dark, I guess, for a while till things calm down to see what's going on. So that's probably one of the biggest things that I can see right now. Tariffs. We're all concerned about tariffs to some degree. It looks like in the fertilizer industry, if the product isn't made in Canada, there won't be any tariffs on it. But of course, the Canadians produce about 80% of all the potash that we use in North America. So that will certainly be subject to tariff if they come. So I think we're all watching that pretty close. We're still losing farms. I think in my area, we've had 3 farms that have changed ownerships or going to change ownership right off, major farms. So we're losing farmers, but we're not really losing that much land. Most of these guys are being acquired by some of their neighbors. And, so it's just much fewer customer base, much less customer base. So that's both good and bad.
We're starting to hear a lot, Brad, about ways of applying fertilizer using GPS and a GIS and able to concentrate more or less as it goes. Is that something that you're seeing a lot? Is that investments that you're making in the business?
My volume is not very good on this. Say that again, sir.
Just we're starting to hear from farmers that they're actually able to apply fertilizer now using GIS systems and GPS systems, and that they it will put it where it needs it the most or not where it needs it the most. Is that a lot of your investment of what you're doing now in your business?
Well, we're not doing that so much here, but that certainly is a major trend in the industry. The Vermont agriculture is a little different than what it is in Illinois or Indiana, something like that. There's a lot more variability in the land that they're planting. The dairy manure being put on. So we're not really seeing that right here. There is a big trend towards that. Drones are becoming quite the thing in the Midwest. I think that is going to be a trend that's coming. The technology that we're seeing, that I've seen on that, when you can go out and spray at 23 miles an hour and return back at 50 miles an hour and get reloaded and go back out in 10 or 15 minutes, and you got one operator that can run 3 or 4 drones. That's gonna play down the road. I think the state has changed their attitudes about drone. A few years ago, they were pretty much against it, but I think there's been a change in thought that it may in fact be something that's going to be practical down the road in certain circumstances. A lot of the farms now have GPS on their tractors. I think that's absolutely a growing trend. We've got it on ours. We've got mapping on all of our rigs. We have, it's all GPS controlled, and we lay out a map so we know exactly where we've applied, how much we've applied. That technology is a little beyond me. I'm too old fashioned to learn that, but it definitely is coming. There's no question about it, and it is here. So yeah.
How do you think?
We're getting to the point where when we can lay down herbicides when we're spraying for corn, we can go down to 6 gallons to the acre. So if you've got a rig that's got 1,000 gallons on it, we can do a lot of acres between fill-ups. So and the chemistry is getting to be less volume. Some of the products we're putting out at 1/3 of an ounce per acre. All those things are changing. Of course, Roundup is still a very big item for us. That actually increases all the time because of some of the requirements that the state have put on about cover crops and things like that, especially, as you well know, we're in clay down here, so you can't always look at your calendar and decide which day you're going to get out onto your field. So with the cover crops out there, and that can be very aggressive, so we have to go in there and sometimes slow those down before they can get back into the fields.
How's the neonics band that's working? I mean, what are your thoughts about that as far as moving forward? And what do your farmers say about that, or any thoughts about that?
They are quite concerned about that because we are such a small percentage of the world or the U.S. corn production, and that the corn seed companies aren't too excited about having another SKU set up for the small amount they're going to sell to Vermont. So they are quite concerned. I hope we don't lose that, because when I first came, everybody bought raw seed, and then we had all these little foil packets that the farmer would have to cut onto the corn and stir it on. Many years ago, a lot of these farmers would come into the office. They'd have their hands and arms would be all red because that's how they stirred it around. They stuck their hands in it and stirred it around. Obviously, the coverage was nowhere near as good as it is. And I'm concerned that because we're so small in the scheme of things, that you may see some regional seed companies try to change the formulas. I don't think that the big boys will pay any attention to it, and they'll just say, this is what it is, take it or leave it.
Are you hearing that, Brad? Are you hearing that they're not really too worried about Vermont as far as supplying seed there? It's a market that they can do without.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They spill more than what they sell in Vermont. What I think what the silage market is, what, 1 or 2% of the whole seed market, and we're 1/100th of 1% or something. I mean, the what we sell in the state of Vermont, you're not going to see the big seed companies try to cater to us. The volume isn't there.
Yeah.
We're already seeing some changes where some of the big seed companies were marketing forward silage, and they've made decisions to stop doing that, stop doing some of the testing on that, because the market isn't big enough for them. It's all about inventory, like everything else.
Anything else? We're going to keep you here and have some more conversations, so please stay with us. But anything else for right now as an opening statement that you'd want us to know?
I think what we got to be looking at, me and the farmers, is the Endangered Species Act. That's coming from the EPA. I think they've made decisions on herbicides, and I believe it's going to be insecticides and fungicides. So there's going to be new labels coming out that's going to be quite a lot more restrictive. and I think we're gonna have maps to show where the endangered area is. I believe there's 1,700 endangered species. So for somebody like me in Brandon, we have some bat caves. So there may be farms that we can't do anything to because of the bat endangered species. So they're already formulating different ways to meet the requirements. But I think the requirements are still being formulated. I'm sure that Steve can talk about that a lot more than I can. And, you know, as an individual, I'm kind of sitting back, waiting for the state of Vermont to kind of keep us up to date as what the feds want us to do.
And one more thing, Brad, I said I was gonna move on just for a second, but can you spend a minute talking about any of the CAFO permits or anything like that? Are anything aware of any of that as far as what your farmers are getting back to you as far as water issues and the Lake Champlain Basin, all of that?
Well, I think EPA is kind of saying that the water quality issue should go from the Department of Ag to Natural Resources. That's been an ongoing discussion, I think, in Montpelier for years about where that authority lies. So it sounds to me like that's going to go to Natural Resources and away from Ag. I don't think that currently Natural Resources have the personnel to take that whole thing over, but I think they're obviously going to have to work on it. And, you know, I think there's going to be some more restrictions. It's going to be more of like a CAFO plan more than a nutrient management plan. There's just going to be, you know, that's going to have to be set up with consultants and go based on more like New York State.
Yeah. Thank you. Hang with us, please, sir.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, well,
do we have Nate with us?
Yes.
Mr. Nate Shania, how are you today, sir?
Oh, he's bumped off.
Oh, he bumped off?
He was here just a minute ago.
Okay, well, Steve, would you want to join us for a little bit?
Oh, sure.
Yep. Good morning, how are you?
Yeah, for the record, Steve Guinell, Director of the Public Health Agriculture Resource Management Division in the agency of agriculture. Mornings. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you.
I hadn't really prepared anything.
Well, you kind of see where we're going with it, and but yeah, whatever you'd like to, floor is yours, sir.
I can follow up on some of the things that Mr. Law has brought up if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so first of all, just for context, we're the regulatory division. We register all the products. We register about 12,000 pesticide products annually, about a little over 17,000 feed products, and that includes pet foods. I think about 5,000 fertilizer products. So any of those products that are distributed in the state have to be registered, and there are certain requirements they have to meet in terms of labeling, and it's all basically a consumer protection. That's the origin of it, just to make sure people are getting what they're paying for. And so we review the labels, we collect samples, we do analysis to make sure that they meet the standards, that kind of thing. So we have that whole program set up. We've been very busy the last couple of years with the whole neonic issue. We talk about that and what's happening with that. The mention of drones, that is something we've been actively trying to promote for the last couple of years. And I think this year, coming up here, we'll actually have some drone applications. We have we were able to establish a permit process under our pesticide law rule that will allow drone application of pesticides, either herbicides or insecticides, fungicides. And we actually there's a business in New York who's in active talks with the mosquito control district, who's a load fair and Carter Creek to do larvicide applications of drone, which makes a lot of sense in the areas we have with the small, relatively small acres that have to be covered. So we're looking forward to that, and that hopefully we had a workshop last year where we brought in drone operators, and tried to get people familiar with it. So that's one thing that we're doing.
I was in Taiwan and visited a factory that they were that were doing the drone applications. It was pretty impressive.
Oh yeah.
And they obviously would like to get on our market. I mean, there's a lot of drone builders right now.
Yeah.
But it was we saw the drones in themselves and and heard a lot about him, saw a lot of video of it. Pretty impressive. And as Brad had said, when you can get, one operator operating four of them and covering those fields, and then you're getting the chemical that's going on there down to, ounces covering acres, pretty impressive.
Yeah, and you get into areas, there are a lot of uses for drones. I mean, there's uses in right of way applications, different hard to reach areas, areas you can't get to by vehicle or by foot, you can send a drone in. Invasive species control. The biggest use we see right now is with larvicide in remote areas because they're difficult to get into. So anyway, that
Can I just jump in? Nate texted me, said, can you tell him to let me in? I don't know what that means, but.
He's in
I'm
now.
back. I'm back.
You wanna-
Got it? Okay.
You gotta stay right there. You gotta stay right there. Yeah. Nate, how are you? Good to see you today.
Hey, how you doing, guys? Well,
Doing well. So you as being a family operator who sold their business but still working for the company that's there, and I don't know if you were on when we had Brad talking about what he's seeing, but the floor is yours. Tell us what you're seeing. Tell us what your farmers are saying.
well, I did. I got kicked off somehow, but I did hear mostly what Brad was saying, and our farmers are seeing basically what he is saying. We're seeing some attrition of some smaller farms in our area here recently. Those acres are being utilized by the larger growers in our area. We've also seen some fertilizer price increase here potentially in the last few weeks. Some nitrogen costs have bumped up. These tariffs could be a problem with some from products like Brad had mentioned, pre-mixed or manufactured products coming out of Canada. The attitude is not great. I feel, if you had to rate it a 1 out of 10, I think it'd probably be like a 6. There are some growers that we're dealing with that are pretty solid, and there are some that are teetering on that line. And it's kind of scary. And that is one of the reasons, one of a handful that, we as a family owned business did sell, just because of the exposure to some accounts receivable. Don't mind taking a few chances now and again, but as the further we went, the larger the chances got. The numbers got larger, and the chances got the odds weren't in our favor. We came out okay, but odds were in our favor.
So just for the committee's benefit, I'm talking a little bit louder because Brad said he couldn't hear us very well, but I apologize if I'm talking too loud. But for the committee's benefit, Brad does the western side of the state on bigger application fields where 1,000 acres isn't unusual, and Nate's on the eastern side of the state where he can get into those bigger fields, but he does a lot of the smaller farms over there. So a lot of the smaller parcels and all of that.
What counts?
Brad would be in all of Addison County and Rutland County and all of down through there, and Nate would be over in Orleans and Lamoille and Caledonian and Essex County and up and down that Connecticut River Valley.
Yeah. Down into Orange, down as far as White River Junction. We get into Franklin County a little bit. Currently, I'm in Central Maine, so we're not afraid to drive, I guess.
Yeah. What about what you're seeing as far as the future, the future of any? We're hearing a lot, Nate, about people coming in, and I know in Orleans we have the train tracks that are bringing in hops and stuff of breweries and stuff like that. Are you seeing any new markets over there opening up, different applications, or are you pretty much with the dairy and maybe some potatoes here or there? What's going on over there?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's pretty much a dairy-based industry that we deal with out of Lyndonville. I've got a few potato growers down in southern Maine I deal with, some vegetable guys. There has been some soybeans here in the last couple of years. That seems to be growing. I think if there was some more infrastructure locally, there'd be more of them. I think some of these larger growers could maybe grow some of their own product versus buying it, bringing it in on 18 wheels. But for the most part, it's status quo. I did hear the question concerning the variable rate with GPS applications of product before I got kicked off. And we as Nutrien, we've got a program called Echelon that we're utilizing that we can plug in and take these GPS maps, take 2.5 acre grid samples, plug that information into the machine, spread the fertilizer at variable rates once the recommendations are met. We've started doing that. It's young, but it's interesting how there can be some cost savings, even though there's some initial startup costs on the application of those products on those acres.
So I think what we're most impressed with, or I can tell you, I've been in dairy my whole life or involved with dairy, but the dairy that I was interested in, I mean, the dairy that I grew up with is it isn't your father's Buick anymore. These young farmers are coming in and they're wise. They're not afraid to do the new way of farming, and it seems like there's been a switch a little bit. Are you both of you guys, do you see that? Are you seeing these young folks coming into this business a little bit wiser and a little bit more educated?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a fairly high percentage of farmers my age that are late 60s, 70s, some 80s. You seem to have families that are now taking over 2 or 3 farms. They've got 3 or 4 boys, and their boys have got kids, and they're the ones that are really super aggressive out there and expanding. And I think that trend's going to continue. Like I said, we're losing farm numbers, but we're not losing farm acres or cattle or anything like that.
Yeah, go ahead. We got a question from the major.
Yeah, I feel the same. I mean, there's a lot of these younger kids, the torch is being passed, and they're very computer savvy for the most part. And when you start talking about some of these variable rate products or some of the technologies that we're starting to use in the industry, that they grasp onto those quicker than maybe some of the older individuals may.
Amen to that.
Are you old, Brad? You old?
Brad, I just were you worried about the kind of the downsizing of the number of farmers? And I know the acreage is staying the same, but are you worried about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, obviously financial exposure is, substantially greater. When I first came here a long time ago, the largest farms probably had 100 acres of corn in, and now it's, these guys are putting in 2,000 and 3,000 acres. So you're holding a receivable for a $20,000 account. Now you're holding receivables for $300,000 or $400,000 or $500,000 accounts if they're not writing the check right off. So you get a little bit more exposure, and it's certainly concentrated. There's no question. And that just adds another area of risk, but it's part of the business. I mean, I've been here since 1981, and I'm still doing business on the same farm with maybe the next generation of them, but it's a pretty stagnant market when it gets right down to it. We haven't seen, I think, like Nate said, we're seeing more and more soybeans being grown around here, and some of the largest farms here are starting to buy local, and some of the farmers that have retired from dairy, from the day-to-day milking a cow, have gone into raising crops. And I think that would take off if we had a little bit more infrastructure. So, I've got several customers right now that are putting in 200, 300, 500 acres of beans and corn, with the idea that's all going to get sold and used here. So we're not bringing corn from Indiana in here. We're not bringing soybean meal from Indiana into here. A lot of it's going to be locally grown. And so what that creates is an area where, all right, I'm a dairy farmer and I'm milking 1,000 cows. I want to make sure I can get my soybean meal 12 months of the year. Well, you haven't got growers in the area that can grow enough and can have storage enough to supply them for 12 months. So it's a catch-22 type of thing. What do we do first? But I think we're seeing a move towards more storage bins, more roasters, more commitments from the farm and the local growers to try to, like Nick said, keep it off the 18-wheeler, have it done locally. Yeah. I think that's going to be one of the major changes in the next few years. The big guys are going to get themselves set up to do that. Obviously, the less you truck something, the less you're paying for, the trucker. And if you can have the local guy with his small truck, 2 or 3 trucks, and he can get it to you in 2 or 3 days, well, you haven't got growers in the area that can grow enough and can have storage enough to supply them for 12 months. So it's a once a week, make a delivery of beans or corn. That's gonna save everybody some money, and it helps, keeps the land open.
And better for the environment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I don't know whether Steve can answer this or either Nate or Brad. One of the strongest concerns expressed last year when we did the neonic bill, and Brad addressed it, I think, perfectly. And it comes down to supply and demand. If you're 1/100th% in terms of what a manufacturer is going to have as a market, you're pretty much insignificant. I mean, I get that. I understand that. So right now, New York and Vermont are the only two states that have put the ban in. And it's effective in 29. Again, not to beat a dead horse, but we tried in this committee to push it out to 2031, but we failed on the floor. Is anyone aware of any other states that are starting to put that same ban in effect? And every state that would be added makes it a little more attractive maybe for a manufacturer to say, hey, maybe we ought to have a different run in the factory and make non-treated seeds. But I haven't heard anything. I guess Steve can maybe help us on that.
Yeah, the only other state I've heard that's considering similar is Connecticut,
Okay.
which also is very small.
Yeah.
Acreage. Minnesota has some legislation that requires their ag agency to do some investigation and potentially take some action, but they're not there yet. And you know, some of the larger states, well, California is one that comes to mind, actually did take some action on neonicotinoids, but they exempted the seed specifically. So, we are definitely, New York and Vermont are definitely are the outliers on the whole issue.
And I will point out, if I remember the bill, a farmer cannot not opt out, but request a waiver from the Agency of Ag.
Right, and we can talk about that when you're ready. I got quite a bit of information on that.
Well, yeah, well, we're on it, so let's talk about it, and if
Okay.
these guys wanna jump in, anytime you guys wanna jump in, just give a holler.
Okay, well, there's a couple of aspects. So, Act 182 was passed, went into effect. It's law now, so we're implementing it, and there are a couple of different aspects of that. One is that there is an exemption process built into the law that allows the secretary to issue a written exemption order, which would allow a farmer to plant neonicotinoid treated seeds if they ask or take or complete an IPM course relative to the use of neonicotinoid treated seeds, and they conduct what's called a pest risk assessment. Okay, pest risk assessment is defined as to what that is. The New York legislation is very similar. It requires that IPM course be taken and a pest risk assessment done. In that state, the pest risk assessment process has to be adopted by rule. It doesn't have to be adopted by rule.
Oh, lost you.
Can't hear you.
Yeah. Yeah. There we go.
Chair, yes, what is IPM?
Oh, I'm sorry. Integrated pest management.
Can
So
you
that's
hear me?
the whole approach
Yes.
to
Better?
controlling agricultural.
Okay,
pests.
thank you.
Thank you.
Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but that exemption you're talking about is on a field by field, year by year basis, is it not? Or at least that's what we're talking about?
Yes, sir. It would, the exemption would be given to whoever requests it for the specific property for which it was requested for 1 year. That's the way it's supposed to
So
work.
if you've got 35 cornfields, that's gonna be quite a little process,
Yes.
Right.
and it's gonna be annual.
Right. So the approach we're taking on this is to work with UVM, Heather Darby in particular, to develop data on what the risk factors are. Because the idea is that if a farm or property meets certain risk factors, then they would get the exemption. And the risk factors we expect now are going to be the cropping practices that result in decaying organic matter. That could be manure application or incorporation of cover crop, maybe some other factors, because the primary pest we're trying to deal with is the corn seed maggot. Corn seed maggot fly lays its eggs in decaying organic matter. If the decaying organic matter is in the field with the corn seed, they'll feed on the corn seed too. So we have to identify what the risk factors are for that to occur at a level that would cause an economic impact to the farmer. Okay, so that's what we're looking at.
Yep. So on the neonates, what is is it the seed itself going into the ground? Is it when they're putting it in the hopper, the dust that comes? What was the major concern in that? Because we have the pumpkin farmer that has had neonics on the pumpkin seed for over 20 years, and he has bees come in and spread the pollen from seed. So it can't be the seed.
Okay, so the insecticide is applied to the corn seed at very low rates. The total amount that's applied to an acre is 0.08 pounds per acre. So it's a very small amount. The benefit of applying it to the seed versus what Mr. Wells was talking about, where the farmer mixes it on the seed, is you get better coverage, you use a lot less of it. The alternative to the seed treatment, you use about 10 times as much. You have to mix it into the seed itself to get the coverage. So anyway, the concern is that the insecticide, the neonicotinoid, is very water soluble, and it gets into the corn plant itself, and it absolutely does that. It is a systemic insecticide, which is what makes it work. It can be found in plant fluids in the corn plant. There's a process where if you've seen a cornfield in the summer, you'd see little drops of moisture in the, that's called vegetation fluid. You can find in the, low residues in that fluid. You can find it in the pollen. It can be found if the pollen moves off site, if there's wind, you can find it on plants along the edge of the field. It is water soluble. You can find it in water in the field and water that moves off the field. Now, all those detections are very low levels, parts per billion levels. Okay. So the question is that affecting managed honeybees and or native pollinators? We testified that we didn't think it did last year. We didn't think the impacts there. We looked at data from various sources that indicated that managed honeybees, at least, we don't have good data on native pollinators, but managed honeybees, at least, do not appear to be negatively affected to the extent that we're having major problems from that source. Now, managed honeybees have lots of problems. Okay. Parasites being the biggest, the varroa might be the biggest impact in all the diseases associated with it. But, it is a fact that we have a record number of honeybee colonies in Vermont. It's up to much over 18,000 now. Can't give you, I don't have the number in front of me, but like 10 years ago it was like 9,000. So we've got more hives. So that is an indicator, to me anyway, my opinion, that the use of the treated seed is not severely impacting the managed honeybee industry. There are people who will dispute that, and they did dispute that, but that's what I'm looking at. The other factor to keep in mind is that there is a contention there is a phenomenon where honeybee colonies maintained over the winter will die, okay? And you have a certain loss. One of the arguments is that honeybee loss is due, or that loss over the winter is due to exposure to the neonicotinoid during the growing season. The counter argument to that, the data that counters that, is that we have beekeepers who bring their bees in and place them in areas where corn will be planted, maintain those colonies through the summer. And then they move those colonies out of the state during the fall and winter. Then they put them on other crops. They have much lower overwintering loss than the folks who maintain the colonies in the state. To me, it appears to me anyway that both sets of bees are exposed to the same amount of neonicotinoid during the growing season because they're both there at the same time. But one group moves out of state and goes and
Go south.
yeah, they pollinate other crops. They do a number of practices that increase, and then they come back again the following spring. There's another group that keeps them in the state, and one factor that I think we need to really investigate is what happens to those bees over the fall and winter. With when you have periods of warm weather in the fall and the winter, the bees break their resting, and they start getting active again, and they use up resources, and then they have under stress. The bees that are out of state aren't exposed to it. They're off on another crop, foraging and continuing to get nutrition. So I think there's evidence that nutrition is a major factor in overwintering loss.
Right.
So anyway, that's what I think is going on. And we need to do research on that, and we need to get more information about that. But it is indisputable that bees are exposed to neonicotinoids during the growing season in Vermont. Now, the level that they're exposed to and the impact of that is, I think, the question. The fact that they're exposed doesn't, I don't think, automatically. I don't think you can automatically conclude that that's what's causing any problems to bees. I think there are other factors. Now, when it comes to native pollinators, that's an open question because we don't have this data. And one of the things that we're working on this year is establishing a joint contract with the University of Vermont and with there's a nonprofit in Vermont called the Vermont Center for Eco Studies. And what we want to do is we want to evaluate what the diversity, we want to quantify the diversity and abundance of native pollinators under different cropping systems. Okay, it's going to be, it has to be a long-term project. It has to be like a 10-year project. You can't just do it for a year. So we're in the process of setting that up. We just had a joint meeting with them, and sort of worked out the protocol to figure out the best way to do this. But the idea is that, I'm an entomologist. I'm board certified entomologist. I did a lot of work in soybeans earlier in my career. It appears to me that when you have a crop like soybeans that has a lot of floral resources, pollinators do better. I mean, my just observations walking through the fields, there are a lot of pollinators in there. And this is in areas, the southeast where a lot of insecticides are used. When, people have an idea that farms in Vermont use a lot of pesticides, we don't use a lot of pesticides compared to other areas of the country. I mean, it's pretty low compared to other areas. But anyway, what we want to do, we have to quantify. It's one thing to say this is what's happening. It's another thing to have the data. So we have to develop the data. And we have a little time, obviously, between now and the thing about the date that Act 22 goes into effect for seeds is January 2029. In the testimony last year, we testified, we had farmers testify that the effective date is actually 2028. Right. Because farmers have to buy their seed in 2028 for the 2029 season. So the impact will be felt in the summer or fall of 2028 is when this is going to hit. So we have to have the process for the pest risk assessment in place by then. And we are, like I said, we're working with Cornell and the New York folks on what they're going to do. They have the legislature, they're appropriated $2 million to Cornell to research this. They've got some things going on. So we're trying to, piggyback. But we also have to do research in Vermont because Vermont is unique in a lot of ways because of the cropping practices, primarily the spreading manure and the use of cover crops. And we want folks to use cover crops because it reduces soil erosion, it reduces phosphorus getting into the lakes. We've got data Laura DePietro can come in here from Water Quality and show you the data, how the phosphorus the phosphorus going to Lake Champlain has dropped dramatically as a result of the use of cover crops, because it reduces soil erosion and uses up any excess phosphorus that has to be there. But the concern, and Mr. Laws, Mr. Chenier can maybe add to this, but farmers are concerned about using cover crops if they don't have the treated seed, because use of cover crops increases the organic matter, which increases the risk. So I don't know if there's anything you guys want to add to that.
Gentlemen?
When you talk about phosphorus, again, I'm gonna go back to when I first came here. I think we probably sold equal amounts of urea, phosphorus, and potash. And when I first came, farmers got rid of the manure. They didn't give it any value. And all that's obviously changed. So right now, my guess is that probably the amount of phosphorus goes out here compared to other products is probably 1/10 of what it used to be. Phosphorus is, I can fill up a bin or two and I have enough for the whole season. All my other bins, they get turned over multiple times. So I think that's contributed to the nutrient management. The farmers are recognizing it. And so phosphorus is such a small player for me now. But what has happened is that we're now deficient in sulfur. Again, when I first came here, farms probably spread 1/3 of their land every year to keep the pH up. And we had no such thing as sulfur deficiencies back then because we had so much acid rain. Now we're deficient in sulfur. So, I'm selling 10 times more sulfur now than I am phosphorus. A high percentage of all the nitrogens go out treated with phosphorus in it, with sulfur in it, excuse me. So that's a change in the market and the environment.
Nate, you seen the same thing?
Yeah, no, a lot of these acres are needing, some different care than what they've seen historically. And a lot of these guys are paying attention to their soil samples and nutrient management plans. But to back up just a second on the neonics, it always comes to mind is that, this decision was made and I can appreciate that, but we have no data from before of what we were seeing for these colonies and the issues in the state of Vermont with these bees dying or having issues, and it just all landed on the neonic, correct?
Yeah, that was the one of the main arguments for supporting the legislation.
Yeah.
So Nate, you're in a different water shed over there. Are you feeling any different pressures other than the phosphorus and stuff? I mean, I think they're looking at nitrogen over on your side of the state. Are you feeling the pressures over there as far as reductions needed, or what's going on over there?
Well, it's the same situation across the state. There's a lot of no-till. Obviously, that manure gets spread on top of the soil instead of getting worked in like it did previously. So we're worried about organic matters, runoff, what have you. But yeah, phosphorus purchases or sales out of our facility are, maybe 5-6% of our sales compared to what they, as Brad said, at one time, they were at least 30-40. It's not anything where it was at one time. So, those trends have been recognized, that the farmers are trying to do as best they can with what they've got for funds to make their dollar stretch on a ton of fertilizer. And phosphorus is not something that they're buying much, if any, of.
And it's expensive.
Sure.
So, and maybe I missed it, but how are they making up the deficiencies in phosphorus if the plant life needs it, or what replaces it, or are they just don't worry about it?
No, you got to worry about it. They're taking credit when they should from the manure.
Correct.
When you're putting 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever the plan is, that generally supplies the amount of phosphorus that you need.
Yep.
Correct.
Okay. Well, we got about 15 minutes left. Just anything else that any of you would want to tell a new committee that we need to be on the lookout for, whether it's now or 3 or 5 years from now, or anything that you can think of that is something that we should be made aware of? Or something we haven't covered yet?
I know there's some talk about PFASs in a bunch of states.
Oh, yeah.
I was on a webinar yesterday with some people out of Washington, and you know, they're trying to get some legislature in Washington so that the if EPA label says it's safe, then it's gonna stop some of these lawsuits. And PFAS is, what they say, there is 40% of the pesticides have some type of PFAS in it, and they're concerned about losing some of that. And apparently there's quite a lot of education in what a PFAS is. And it's in a lot of things, from brake fluid to your coating on your nonstick pan, obviously in the pesticides as well. So I think the industry is watching that closely, and they're concerned about that and whether or not they should be included or not included. But they're hoping that Washington will clarify that so they stop some of these lawsuits.
PFAS, what you
Yeah.
information about PFAS.
Yeah, and the state is, I know the state's very active with that. We have the situations down in some of these guys' territories in the lower part of the state and stuff. And so, certainly on the radar here in the state of Vermont.
Right.
Yes. Well, to just cut in for a second here, I'm in Maine, like I mentioned earlier, and that's one thing I've had to deal with here with our sales in Maine, that they've limited a lot of products, you know, whether they're fungicide, herbicide, insecticide in this state at the state level because of the PFAS and the issues that they've had maybe let's use the word created here. And so therefore, I mean, for some of these growers, when I look at what they've got for tools, they don't have as many tools in the tool shed as they once did. And what they're using is, some of it is older chemistry that is not as safe in the soil. But because the jug may not have some PFAS in it, or the product itself may not have PFAS in it, that's what they're left to use. And it's made some things more expensive and a little more harder for them to control. So if we can stay in front of that so we don't have a Maine type issue happen in Vermont, that'd be fabulous.
Yes.
I'll tell you, we're starting a conversation in this committee, and of course, it's nothing that the state can handle all by itself, if it can at all. But we are talking about having a guest worker program in the state of Vermont. We're going to be spending some time on that. I'm probably going to put some information out this weekend. We've had brief discussions with the governors. The committee's talked about it, and I've had some discussions with Senator Welch about that. So we're going to try to do something and push the envelope a little bit harder on that, and get a conversation started. I don't know if we'll be successful, but we're gonna keep on talking about that. So hopefully we'll get somewhere with that.
If I may, there's
Yes,
a couple
please.
other things, like one, getting back to the Act 182, one of the requirements was for us to adopt a best management practices
Yep.
rule. And just yesterday, we sent the recommendations for that rule to this committee and to the House.
Yep.
We had to do that for the third, so that's out there. That was so it's a rule that consists of a set of recommendations for best management practice for the use of neonicotinoid treated seeds and for neonicotinoid pesticides that are not prohibited after July 1, 2025. And we developed that in a real public process with the Agricultural Innovation Board. Had a lot of meetings about it, and it's all out there. And then we're, once, so we were required to provide it to you 30 days before we file it with the Secretary of State. So that started yesterday. So 29 days, we'll file it with the Secretary of State and then start the rulemaking process with that. And I'd be glad to talk to you about that if you want, and any level of detail. The other two things I just want to bring up real quick. One is when it comes to PFAS, the whole issue of PFAS hinges on how you define what a PFAS is. Okay. And As a result, I can't remember the name of the bill, but there was a bill last year that required the agency of, the Department of Environmental Conservation, RMC, Department of Health, to work together to develop the recommendations, which we did. And that's been provided to the House Environment Committee, maybe the Senate, but we can certainly provide it to you guys too. But basically, the agreement between the three agencies was to define PFAS in using the same definition that the federal government uses under the Toxic Substance Control Act, which is a different definition than Maine uses or Minnesota uses. And it's a lot narrower. And we believe it's justified because of the fact that it targets those molecules that actually have been shown to have some persistence, bioaccumulation, or toxic effects. The broader definition covers a lot of products which have not been shown to have those effects. So under TSCA and under FIFRA, which is pesticide law, there have been studies that have identified those molecules that actually do have those effects. The problem with a broad definition, and the broader definition is any long chain molecule with a single fluorine, single atom of fluorine in it. It's just way too broad, and it captures a lot of products that don't have those effects. And it basically, I don't know, I forget the number, but lots of chemicals that are all over. The narrower definition actually targets the ones that have been shown to have some toxicological effects, and gives you something you can actually get a handle on and do something. So that's that part, but that's the process going on. And then the other thing I want to talk about is the ESA issue that Mr. Laws brought up. So the Endangered Species Act, the EPA has adopted a new strategy about how they're going to meet their obligations under the Endangered Species Act, and it has established a process for adding some additional requirements for how pesticides are used, certain pesticides are used. I've been working on this at the national level since November of 2022. I've been involved in a couple of committees. I just got back from a meeting in North Carolina about it, and where we talked about it. So I think, and I'll reach out to Mr. Wells and make sure I give him the latest information too. But the point is, it is happening, but there are ways it can be handled that are, I think, reasonable. So we can talk about that. And interestingly, a lot of it is connected to the increase in the use of the precision ag, using the GPS and the map-based application. Actually, is a way to meet those obligations without causing undue burdens on the farmer or anything. So that's with a little intersection there. I think we have some room to maneuver. But we can talk that. It'll be a level of detail you want.
That's a good thing.
Gentlemen, anything else that you would like to bring to us?
Well, I'm good. The world's perfect.
Yeah.
Rose colored glasses on us.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
yes.
I'm close to retirement, so.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming in today. Anything that you think that we ought to be aware of, please let us know. You guys are representing different geographical areas of the state. I mean, I think Nate, you get out of the state some and all of that. So you're seeing some of, it's very helpful to understand what Maine's doing, whether it's going to be good for Vermont or not, and what we need to be aware of coming forward. Of course, we always have the expertise of Steve in here as well. So if you guys can keep us apprised of what you're seeing out there, we really appreciate that very much. And we want to thank you for coming in today.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Thank you.
Okay, Steve, thank you very much. We appreciate it. One question before you guys go.
Well, it's more, if we could get a precision applicator, you said New York has one?
A drone.
Yeah,
Right.
come in and
Yeah,
try to get ahead of, be ahead of it before it gets to the state and have
absolutely.
an idea that the ag community will be able to say, hey, we've already started studying it and stuff.
Yeah,
Nate, are you using any of your farmers using drones, Nate?
There's a couple smaller guys that have maybe some that are using, they're just personal ones that they can use with cameras for scouting. We as Nutrient have been talking about it here for about 18 months about trying to get one or two in our division in the Northeast, but budget wise, it just hasn't come to fruition. If you want to set one of those up properly, the numbers I heard, I think recently with a truck, a trailer, batteries, what have you, you're going to be well over $100,000. And at this point, they're not quite ready to jump into that, along with getting somebody trained to have the aerial licenses that are need to run that. So, but I think it's something that we need to collectively somehow, some way, get one in this area, in the state, I should say, because I think that's a tool that could be used greatly, at least one, if not more.
Yeah, especially with
I
this.
think there's somebody, isn't there somebody in Richmond that's playing around with drones? I don't know if you're aware of that, Steve. Seems like.
yeah,
I don't know if we
we've
should
got
mention
some.
names or not, but I thought there was a farmer's son that was getting heavily involved in drones.
Right. There are a number of people who are either have purchased a drone or are looking at drones. But in order to apply a pesticide with drone, you have to get a permit.
Oh, I know that. Yeah, they haven't gone that far, but I think they're trying to use it for scouting and things like that, though.
Yeah.
Sure.
But we do have, like I said, one company in New York that is in active talks to come here. To start doing applications, and there are lots of interest, and we've streamlined the process to get a permit, and one of our staff members, Zach Sikowski, has been involved, with national groups to make sure we're on we're aware of everything that needs to happen. I think it'll happen this year. I think we'll have drones operating.
I really think the committee should be ahead of the ball as well.
Yeah.
We could set up a,
Yeah.
demonstration or have them come in and.
Yeah, let's, if you could do that, Steve,
Yeah.
we certainly would love to be ahead of that, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, the drones are used are very large,
Yeah, they
half
are.
the size of this table, maybe larger. They're expensive. You have to have the infrastructure with, the batteries have to be changed out. You have to have trained people. We could certainly set up a field, if you guys want to do, but it might be easier just to bring in some video and show you.
Yeah, that would be great. I think that would be very effective. Well, we
Yeah.
got a few months before we see any outside weather where you could actually see one working. But
Sure.
if we could do that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'd be glad to do that. Well, like I said, we had a workshop last year that was pretty well attended, and we made, if there's enough interest, we'll do it again. Bring in a couple operators and they can show what they can do.
That's good.
Explain it.
I'd rather spend $100,000 on a drone setup than $600,000 for a ground vehicle that leaves marks.
Oh, well, and as you said, Brad, I mean, you're in that clay area over there. You just don't dictate what days you can get on there. And if you're not touching the ground, it would certainly make it easier for you.
And we're a little flatter, so line of sight makes it a little easier for us too.
Yeah, very, very true. Very true. Well, good. We had a good morning with you folks, and we appreciate you very much. Good to see you both again. And we'll catch up with you guys soon. Thanks for coming in.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Steve.